Welcome, dear listeners, to a world where the ocean's deepest mysteries hold the key to the heart's greatest treasures. Tonight, let yourself drift into the story of Dr. Luna Reyes, a woman who speaks the language of the sea, and Captain James Morrison, who finds his salvation in her underwater realm. The Pacific Research Station sat like a wooden dream suspended over the endless blue, its stilts disappearing into tide pools that shimmered with secrets older than time. Each night, as darkness claimed the sky, these pools would come alive with nature's own light, show bioluminescent organisms painting streaks of blue-green. Fire across the water's surface, Dr. Luna. Reyes pressed her palms against the cool glass of the underwater viewing chamber, her breath fogging the surface as she watched the evening's transformation begin. At 27, she possessed the kind of passionate intelligence that burned bright in her dark eyes, the kind that made her more comfortable in the company of sea creatures than people. Her colleagues at the university often called her obsessed, but Luna knew better. She wasn't obsessed, she was in love. In love with the ocean's infinite mysteries, with the way bioluminescent plankton could turn water into liquid starlight, with the possibility that somewhere in these depths lay answers to questions humanity hadn't even learned to ask yet. But tonight, as she had for so many nights before, Luna felt the familiar ache of incompleteness settling in her chest like a weight. She had devoted her life to understanding the ocean's secrets, yet she felt as though she were missing the most important discovery of all. Her research on bioluminescence was groundbreaking. She was on the verge of understanding how these tiny organisms created their ethereal light, how they communicated through their glowing dance, but what good were scientific breakthroughs when she had no one to share her wonder with? The research station felt particularly lonely tonight. Her team had returned to the mainland for the weekend, leaving her alone with her specimens, her data, and the endless symphony of waves against the platform's supports. Luna pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and made her way to the main deck, where the salt air immediately tangled itself in her long black hair above her. The lighthouse on the nearby cliff swept its beam across the water in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. She had often wondered about the keeper of that light, someone else who chose to live at the edge of the world, someone else who found solace in solitude. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, she could see a figure moving around the lighthouse grounds, but they had never met. Two souls keeping vigil over the same stretch of ocean, yet worlds apart. Luna descended the metal stairs to the floating dock where her research vessel bobbed gently in the swell. Tomorrow she planned to venture deeper, to the underwater cave system she'd discovered last month, a place where the bioluminescent organisms seemed to gather in impossible numbers, creating a light show that took her breath away every time she witnessed it. But these dives were becoming increasingly dangerous to attempt alone. The caves were deeper than her usual research sites, and the ocean here was unpredictable, famous for its sudden swells and hidden currents. She should find a diving partner, she knew. The university protocols demanded it. But Luna had always been particular about who she trusted in her underwater world. The ocean required respect, understanding, a willingness to listen to its moods and rhythms. Too many divers approached the sea like conquerors rather than guests. She needed someone who understood that the ocean was not something to be dominated, but rather something to be danced with as if summoned by her thoughts. The lighthouse beam swept across the water once more, and Luna found herself looking up at that distant tower with a longing she couldn't quite name. What would it be like, she wondered, to have someone who understood her passion? Someone who saw the magic she saw in every drop of seawater? Someone who wouldn't think her strange for spending hours talking to bioluminescent plankton like old friends? The ocean whispered against the dock, and Luna listened, as she always did. But tonight, its voice seemed to carry a promise, a suggestion that change was flowing in with the tide, that tomorrow would bring more than just another day of research. Tomorrow, the ocean seemed to say, would bring discovery of an entirely different kind. Luna smiled softly and made her way back inside, unaware that high above on the cliff, a pair of steady blue eyes had been watching the research station's lights, wondering about the soul brave enough to live so intimately with the sea. The morning sun painted the Pacific in shades of copper and gold as Luna prepared for her dive to the underwater caves. She had risen early, as was her habit, to catch the ocean in its calmest mood. Her diving gear lay spread across the dock like the components of some elaborate ritual wetsuit. Fins, the specialized underwater camera that had cost her 3 months' salary, and the custom breathing apparatus that allowed her to stay down long enough to properly observe the bioluminescent colonies. The weather forecast had been perfect: calm seas, minimal wind, ideal conditions for her deep cave exploration. But as Luna performed her final equipment checks, she noticed the subtle signs that spoke of the ocean's changing mood. The swells were longer than expected. The water had that particular gray-green tint that suggested a storm system moving in from the west. And the seabirds were flying in patterns that made her pause. Any sensible researcher would postpone the dive. But Luna had been waiting weeks for the right combination of lunar phase and tidal conditions to study the bioluminescent mating displays in the deep caves. This opportunity wouldn't come again for another month, and her research grant had deadlines that couldn't wait for perfect weather. She was halfway through her pre-dive breathing exercises when the first real wave hit the platform. Not dangerous, but definitely larger than forecast. The research station shuddered gently, and Luna's expensive underwater camera slid toward the edge of the dock. She lunged for it, her foot slipping on the wet planking, and watched in horror as $5,000 worth of irreplaceable research equipment tumbled toward the churning Pacific. The splash echoed across the water like a gunshot, and Luna felt her heart sink as surely as her camera had. Without that equipment, her research would be set back months. The specialized lenses, the pressure housings, the calibrated light meters, all of it now settling into 40 feet of water just beyond the reef. No, 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 she whispered, calculating dive times and equipment retrieval possibilities. The camera would be landing right about there, where the seafloor dropped off into the deeper channel. Retrievable, but only if she acted quickly, before the current carried it into the underwater canyon where she'd never find it. She was reaching for her diving gear when a voice called out across the water, "Everything all right over there?" Luna looked up to see a small boat approaching from the direction of the lighthouse, cutting through the swells with the confidence of someone who truly knew these waters. As it drew closer, she could make out the figure of a man at the helm, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the easy balance of someone completely at home on the ocean. "I dropped some equipment," she called back, her voice carrying clearly across the morning air. "Research camera. It's expensive and I really need it back." The boat pulled up alongside the research platform's dock, and Luna got her first clear look at her unexpected visitor. He was older than she'd initially thought, maybe mid-30s, with sun-weathered skin and the kind of steady blue eyes that seemed to hold the depth of the ocean itself. His dark hair was tousled by salt here, and there was something about the careful way he moved that suggested either military training or a lifetime spent on the water. "Probably both, James Morrison," he said, securing his boat with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it thousands of times. I keep the lighthouse. He nodded toward the cliff. Saw you were having some trouble, Dr. Luna Reyes, she replied, surprised by how her name sounded different when spoken to someone who looked at her with such focused attention. Marine biologist. And yes, definitely having trouble. That camera is pretty much my whole research project. James studied the water where her equipment had disappeared, his expression thoughtful. 40 feet, maybe 45. Right at the edge of the drop-off, he looked back at her, and Luna felt something flutter in her chest at the quiet confidence in his voice. I can get it for you. Oh, I couldn't ask you to, you didn't ask, he said simply. I'm offering. He was already reaching for what looked like military-grade diving equipment stowed in his boat. Besides, I know these waters better than most. Been diving here for, well, longer than I care to calculate. There was something in his tone, a shadow that passed briefly across his features, that made Luna curious. But before she could form a question, James was suiting up with movements so fluid and automatic they seemed almost meditative. The thing is, Luna found herself saying, it's not just about retrieving the camera. That particular spot where it landed, that's actually where I was planning to dive today. There's an underwater cave system there, and the bioluminescent organisms. Well, they're doing something remarkable. James paused in his preparations, looking at her with renewed interest. Bioluminescent? Living light, Luna explained, feeling her passion for her work warming her voice despite her concern about the equipment. Tiny organisms that create their own illumination. They gather in those caves in numbers I've never seen before. And I think they're communicating, actually talking to each other through patterns of light. Something shifted in James's expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Light patterns, he repeated softly. Underwater communication. You know about bioluminescence. I know about underwater communication, he said carefully. Different kind, maybe. But yes, he secured his mask and checked his regulator with the thorough precision of someone for whom underwater safety was more than just protocol, it was survival. Tell you what, Dr. Reyes, let me get your camera. And then maybe you can show me these light patterns you're studying. The offer was casual. But something in his voice suggested it meant more to him than simple curiosity. Luna found herself nodding before her usual caution with strangers could assert itself. Call me Luna, she said. And, thank you, really. I was about to attempt some very ill-advised solo diving. James smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. Well, we can't have that. The ocean's got enough mysteries without adding unnecessary risks to the mix. He slipped over the side of his boat with barely a splash. And Luna watched in fascination as he disappeared beneath the surface with the fluid grace of someone who belonged underwater as much as on land. Through the clear water, she could see him descending with powerful, efficient strokes, following what must have been her camera's trajectory with an accuracy that spoke of exceptional underwater navigation skills. Minutes passed, and Luna found herself holding her breath in sympathy, though she knew he was far too experienced a diver to need her concern. When he finally surfaced, her camera cradled carefully in his hands. She felt a rush of relief and gratitude so intense it surprised her. One research camera. Slightly damp but otherwise intact, he said, treading water effortlessly as he passed the equipment up to her. Their fingers brushed as she took the camera from him. And Luna felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with relief about her equipment. His hands were warm despite the cold water, steady and sure. and for a moment she found herself looking into those ocean blue eyes from very close range. "Thank you," she breathed, and meant it in ways that went beyond gratitude for the camera rescue. "My pleasure," James replied, and something in his tone suggested he meant that in ways that went beyond simple helpfulness. As he hauled himself back into his boat, Luna found herself hoping that the offer to show him her bioluminescent caves still stood. Something told her that James Morrison understood more about the ocean's mysteries than he'd initially let on, and she had the strangest feeling that he might just understand a few of her mysteries as well. 2 hours later, Luna found herself sharing the confined space of James's boat as they made their way toward the deeper waters where the caves lay hidden. The storm system that had been threatening all morning seemed to have stalled offshore, leaving them with workable conditions, not perfect, but manageable for experienced divers who knew how to read the ocean's moods. James had surprised her by producing diving gear that was not only professional grade but meticulously maintained. As they'd prepared their equipment together on the research platform, Luna had found herself stealing glances at the way he moved, economical, precise, with the kind of underwater awareness that took years to develop. When she'd complimented him on his gear, he'd simply said he'd learned the importance of good equipment in the service, and something in his tone had discouraged further questions. Now, as the boat cut through the swells toward the dive site, Luna found her curiosity about her companion growing stronger than her usual professional reserve. There was something about James Morrison that didn't quite add up: the lighthouse keeper who'd have like a professional, the quiet man who understood underwater communication. The way his eyes seemed to hold depths she couldn't quite fathom. "There," she said, pointing toward a section of water that looked identical to everything around it, but that she knew marked the entrance to her underwater world. "The cave system starts about 30 feet down. Are you sure you're comfortable with cave diving? It's different from open water." James cut the engine and looked at her with what might have been amusement. "I'll manage," he said simply. But something in his tone suggested vast understatement. They performed their buddy checks with the kind of thorough attention that marked both of them as serious divers testing regulators, checking air supplies, confirming dive plans. But there was something else happening beneath the professional preparation, a building awareness of each other that made even routine safety checks feel charged with anticipation. "The bioluminescent displays usually start about 50 feet down," Luna explained as they prepared to enter the water. "The organisms seem to respond to the decreased light levels." "But James," she paused, realizing she was about to share something she'd never told anyone. "What you'll see down there, it's unlike anything most people ever experience. It's like swimming through liquid starlight." He looked at her then with an expression so intense it made her breath catch. "Sounds like something worth seeing," he said quietly. They entered the water together, and immediately Luna could see that her instincts about James had been correct. He moved underwater with the fluid confidence of someone completely at home in this element, his movements economical and sure. As they descended toward the cave entrance, she found herself matching his rhythm, and it struck her how naturally they seemed to swim together, as if they'd been dive partners for years rather than hours. The cave entrance appeared below them like a cathedral doorway carved from living rock. Luna had discovered this place 3 months ago during a routine survey dive, but she'd never brought another person here. Something about the way James moved beside her, respectful, aware, unhurried, told her she'd made the right choice in sharing it with him. As they passed through the entrance and into the cave system proper, the transformation began. The sunlight from above faded to a deep blue-green glow. And then, as if responding to their presence, The first bioluminescent organisms began to wake. It started as tiny points of light scattered along the cave walls, individual plankton responding to the water movement created by their passage. But as they swam deeper, the display intensified. Colonies of bioluminescent algae painted flowing ribbons of green fire along the rocky surfaces, while jellyfish drifted past them like living lanterns, their bell-shaped bodies pulsing with ethereal light. Luna glanced over at James and saw his eyes wide behind his mask, his expression one of pure wonder. She'd seen that look before on the faces of first-time visitors to her underwater world. But somehow seeing it on his face felt different, more meaningful, more personal. They swam deeper into the cave system, following the natural tunnel as it curved and branched. Luna led the way to her favorite observation spot, a natural amphitheater where the cave opened into a larger chamber. Here, the bioluminescent displays reached their peak, with thousands of organisms creating a light show that rivaled anything nature produced on land. But tonight, something extraordinary was happening. The organisms weren't just glowing randomly, they were pulsing in patterns, synchronized waves of light that moved through the water like visual music. Luna had witnessed this phenomenon only twice before, and never with another person present to share the experience. She turned to James, pointing excitedly at the display, and saw that he was watching not just the lights but her reaction to them. Even through his diving mask, she could see the intensity of his attention, the way he seemed to be memorizing every detail of her wonder and delight when they finally surfaced in a pocket of air within the cave system. Luna immediately began talking, her words tumbling out in an excited rush. Did you see the patterns? The way they were synchronized? I've been hypothesizing that they're actually communicating using the light displays to coordinate mating behaviors or territorial boundaries. It's like they have their own language, their own way of. She stopped abruptly, realizing that James was watching her with an expression that made her suddenly aware of how close they were in the confined space, how her enthusiasm had brought them face to face in the dim, otherworldly light. I'm sorry, she said, suddenly self-conscious. I get carried away when I talk about my research. Most people think I'm a little obsessed. Most people, James said quietly, his voice echoing softly in the cave chamber, haven't seen what you've seen, haven't felt what you feel about this place. There was something in his tone that made Luna look at him more closely. You understand it though, don't you? The way the ocean speaks. James was quiet for a long moment, treading water beside her in the phosphorescent glow. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of experience she hadn't heard before. I used to be a Navy diver, he said simply. Rescue operations mostly. Search and recovery. I spent a lot of time underwater, in situations where understanding the ocean's moods could mean the difference between bringing someone home and. He trailed off, then continued more quietly. The ocean was my partner for 12 years. You learn to listen to it, to read its signals, to trust it even when you can't see more than a few feet in any direction. Luna felt her heart constrict with understanding. That's why you moved to the lighthouse. Why you're so comfortable down here. The lighthouse is quieter than my old life, James said. But yes, I needed to stay close to the water. It's the only place where my mind feels clear. They floated there together in the gentle swell within the cave, surrounded by the soft light of a million tiny organisms. And Luna felt something fundamental shifting between them. This wasn't just about shared diving skills or mutual appreciation for the ocean's beauty. This was about recognition, one soul recognizing another, to people who had found their sanctuary in the same mysterious element. The bioluminescence, she said softly. It helps, doesn't it? Being around all this light, all this life. It's like being reminded that beautiful things can come from dark places. James looked at her with such intensity that Luna felt her breath catch even above water. Yes, he said simply. Exactly like that. As they prepared to continue their dive, to explore more of the cave system together, Luna realized that she was no longer thinking about this as a research expedition. She was thinking about it as a journey, one that she was taking with someone who understood not just her work, but the deeper need that drove it. Someone who saw the magic she saw, who felt the oceans call the way she did. Someone who might just understand all the parts of her that she'd never been able to share with anyone before. The underwater cave system seemed to stretch endlessly before them, each chamber revealing new wonders, new displays of living light that took Luna's breath away. But what amazed her even more than the bioluminescent spectacle was the way James moved through this underwater realm, not just with skill, but with a kind of reverent attention that told her he truly understood the sacred nature of what they were witnessing. As they swam deeper into the cave network, following tunnels that Luna had never fully explored, she found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her. The way he moved through the water with such fluid grace, the way he instinctively knew when to lead and when to follow, the way he seemed to anticipate her movements as if they were connected by something more than just dive buddy protocols. They surfaced in another air pocket, this one smaller and more intimate than the first. And Luna realized that her heart was racing from more than just the exertion of the dive. In the soft, otherworldly glow of the bioluminescent organisms, James's face seemed almost ethereal, water droplets catching and reflecting the blue-green light like tiny stars. "There's something I need to tell you," James said, his voice low in the confined space. "About why I'm really here at the lighthouse." Luna treaded water beside him, sensing the weight of whatever he was about to share. "You don't have to, I want to," he interrupted gently. I've never brought anyone down here before. Never shared this with anyone. But being here with you, seeing how you understand this place." He paused, his eyes searching hers in the phosphorescent light. "My last mission as a Navy diver was a rescue operation. A submarine accident. I was supposed to bring 6 men home." Luna felt her heart constrict. Understanding immediately what he wasn't saying, "I brought home 3, James continued, his voice steady, but she could hear the pain underneath. "The ocean. It's where I lost my team, but it's also the only place where I can still feel close to them. Where the guilt doesn't feel so heavy." "James," Luna whispered, reaching out without thinking to touch his arm where they floated together. The contact sent electricity through the water between them. "The lighthouse keeper job came up 6 months after I left the service," he said. "Isolated, quiet, right on the water. Perfect for someone who needed to disappear for a while. But I've been hiding, Luna, just existing until today." "What changed today?" He looked at her with such intensity that Luna felt as though the water around them had suddenly become charged with electricity. "You did. Watching you with your camera, the way you talked about the bioluminescence, the way you moved down here like this is where you belong. You reminded me what it feels like to see wonder instead of just survival." They were floating closer now, drawn together by currents that had nothing to do with the ocean around them. Luna could see every detail of his face in the ethereal light, the way his lashes were dark with water, the intensity in his blue eyes, the careful way he was watching her response to his words. "I haven't felt this alive In years, he admitted quietly. Luna's breath caught. She had spent her adult life studying the mysteries of the deep, but she had never encountered anything as fascinating as the man floating beside her in this underwater cathedral. "I know the feeling," she whispered. "I've been so focused on my research, on understanding the ocean's secrets, that I forgot there might be other kinds of discovery I was missing." "What kinds of discovery?" Instead of answering with words, Luna let herself drift closer to him in the gentle swell of the cave. Their legs brushed as they treaded water, and she saw his pupils dilate even in the dim light, the kind that involves two people instead of just one, she said softly. James reached out then, his fingers tracing along her jawline above the water. And Luna felt as though every bioluminescent organism in the cave had suddenly decided to take up residence in her bloodstream. His touch was gentle but sure. The touch of someone who knew the value of precision, of patience, of waiting for exactly the right moment. "Luna," he said, her name sounding different in his voice, richer, more meaningful. Like a word in a language she'd been waiting her whole life to learn. "We should probably head back up," she said, but made no move to swim away from him. "Probably," he agreed, but his hand was still cupping her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone with reverent attention. They stayed there for another heartbeat, floating in the phosphorescent glow, balanced on the edge of something that felt as vast and mysterious as the ocean itself. Then James smiled, that transformative smile she'd glimpsed earlier, and nodded toward the tunnel that would lead them back toward the surface. "Besides," he said, "I have something I want to show you." Up at the lighthouse, as they made their way back through the cave system, Luna found herself swimming closer to James, the dive protocol strictly required. Every accidental touch, his hand steadying her as they navigated a narrow passage, his body brushing against hers as they swam through the cathedral chamber, sent waves of awareness through her that had nothing to do with the bioluminescent organisms around them. When they finally surfaced outside the caves, the afternoon sun felt almost shockingly bright after the ethereal glow of the underwater world. But as they floated together beside James's boat, Luna realized that the most radiant thing in her field of vision wasn't the sun at all, it was the way James was looking at her. As if she were the most fascinating discovery he'd ever made. "The lighthouse?" she asked, remembering his offer. "If you want," he said. But there was something almost vulnerable in the way he asked, as if her answer mattered more than he wanted to admit. Luna looked back toward the research station, where her data waited to be analyzed, her specimens needed tending. Her carefully ordered scientific life beckoned with its familiar routine. Then she looked at James, treading water beside her with the late afternoon light turning his wet hair golden and his eyes holding promises of discoveries she'd never thought to make. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I want to see what you want to show me." As they climbed into his boat and began the journey toward the lighthouse, Luna realized that her research into underwater communication had taken an unexpected turn. She was beginning to understand that some of the most important messages weren't transmitted through patterns of bioluminescent light at all, they were communicated through lingering glances, gentle touches, and the way two people could move together through the water as if they'd been swimming in synchrony their entire lives. The lighthouse rose before them on its cliff, and Luna felt her pulse quicken with anticipation that had nothing to do with scientific curiosity and everything to do with the man beside her, who had shown her that the ocean's greatest mysteries might just be the connections that could form beneath its surface. The lighthouse stood majestically against the evening sky, its white tower catching the last rays of sunlight as James secured his boat at the small dock carved into the cliff face. Luna had never been this close to the structure before, and she was struck by how perfectly it seemed to belong to its environment, not imposed upon the landscape but grown from it. Like something the ocean itself had dreamed into existence. "It's beautiful," she said as they climbed the winding path up the cliff face. "How long have you been keeper here?" 2 years, James replied, but something in his tone suggested it felt both longer and shorter than that. Long enough to know every mood the ocean has from this vantage point. Not long enough to stop feeling like a guest in its presence. The lighthouse keeper's cottage was modest but welcoming, with windows that offered sweeping views of the Pacific in every direction. But what took Luna's breath away wasn't the spectacular vista, it was what James had done with the space. The main room had been transformed into something between a meditation area and a shrine to the sea. The walls were covered with underwater photography that rivaled anything she'd seen in marine biology journals, and in the center of the room sat something that made her heart skip a beat. "Is that?" "A decompression chamber," James said quietly, "modified for research rather than emergency use. I've been documenting the bioluminescent activity from up here, trying to understand the patterns you're studying from a different perspective." Luna moved closer to examine his setup, and her amazement grew. This wasn't the amateur equipment of a casual hobbyist. This was professional-grade research apparatus, maintained with military precision and organized with the systematic approach of someone who understood scientific methodology. "James, this is incredible. The photography, the documentation system. How did you turns out military training is good for more than just underwater rescue," he said, but she could hear the pride in his voice, carefully contained but unmistakably present. "I've been watching your research station for months, wondering about the woman who lived so intimately with the sea. When I saw your light displays down there today, I realized you've been studying the same phenomena I've been documenting from up here." He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a thick portfolio, opening it to reveal photographs that made Luna's breath catch. They were the most stunning images of bioluminescence she'd ever seen, but more than that. They showed patterns and behaviors she hadn't been able to document from her underwater perspective. "Look at this," James said, pointing to a series of time-lapse photographs showing the cave system from above. "The bioluminescent displays aren't random. They're coordinated across multiple cave networks, like a communication system that extends for miles along the seafloor." Luna felt her scientific excitement building, but it was overlaid with something deeper: admiration for this man who had been conducting research that complemented her own, alone and unrecognized. "This is groundbreaking work, James. Why haven't you published any of it?" He was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the darkening ocean. "I started this as therapy, I guess. A way to focus on something beautiful instead of other things. But after a while, it became more than that. It became a way of understanding something I'd never paid attention to before." "What do you mean?" James turned back to her, and in the soft light from the lighthouse's automated beacon, Luna could see vulnerability in his expression that hadn't been there before. In the Navy, the ocean was a tool, a battlefield sometimes, a place where missions succeeded or failed, where people lived or died. I was good at my job, but I never really saw the ocean as alive, as something with its own intelligence, its own beauty." He moved closer to her, and Luna felt the air between them become charged with possibility. "But watching you today," he continued, "seeing the way you move down there, the way you talk about the organisms like they're old friends, you showed me something I never knew was there. You showed me that the ocean isn't just where I work, or where I lost my team, or where I go to remember them. It's where I can learn to live again. Luna felt tears prick at her eyes, moved by his words in ways that went beyond the professional to something deeply personal. "You're giving me too much credit," she said softly. "No," James said firmly, stepping closer until she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "I'm not giving you nearly enough." He reached out then, his fingers tracing along her arm from shoulder to wrist with reverent attention, as if he were memorizing the shape of her through touch. "Luna, I've spent 2 years in this lighthouse, thinking I was healing, but I was really just hiding. Today, for the first time since I left the service, I felt like I was participating in life instead of just observing it." "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of waves against the cliff far below. "I know we just met," he said, his hands coming up to frame her face with gentle precision. "I know this is fast and maybe crazy, but I feel like I've been waiting for you without knowing I was waiting. Like the ocean brought you to me." Luna leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as she absorbed the warmth of his palms against her skin. "I've been alone with my research for so long," she admitted. "I thought that was enough. I thought understanding the ocean's mysteries was all I needed. But today, she opened her eyes and looked directly into his, letting him see all the wonder and attraction and possibility she was feeling. "Today I realize there are some mysteries that can only be explored with the right person beside you." That was when James kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, passionate kiss of movie romance, but something far more precious, a gentle exploration. A question asked with lips and breath and the careful attention of someone who understood the value of patience. Luna felt herself melting into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel the steady rhythm of his heart when they finally broke apart. They remained close, foreheads touching, sharing breath in the soft glow of the lighthouse beacon. "I love you," James said simply, the words carrying the weight of complete honesty. "I know it's impossible to love someone you've known for less than a day, but I do. I love your passion for your work. I love the way you move underwater like you belong there. I love that you see magic in places other people see emptiness. I love you, Luna Reyes, and I don't care if it's too soon to say so." Luna felt her heart expand in her chest, filled with a joy so complete it took her breath away. "It should be too soon," she said, smiling through tears of happiness. "By every rational measure, it should be way too soon. But James, I love you too. I love your gentleness. I love how you understand the ocean's moods. I love that you see beauty in the same places I do. I love that you've been up here documenting the same phenomena I've been studying. Like we've been working together all along without knowing it." He kissed her again, then deeper this time, and Luna felt as though every bioluminescent organism in the ocean was suddenly pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. When they broke apart, she was breathless and glowing with happiness. "Come with me," James whispered, taking her hand and leading her up the spiral staircase that wound through the lighthouse tower. "I want to show you something else." They climbed together in comfortable silence, their fingers intertwined, Luna's heart racing with anticipation. At the top of the lighthouse, James had created another sanctuary, a circular observation deck surrounded by windows that offered a 360-degree view of the ocean, but it was what was happening in the water below that made Luna gasped in wonder. The bioluminescent displays she'd witnessed in the caves were part of something much larger. From this height, she could see that the phenomenon extended across miles of ocean, creating patterns of light that moved in synchronized waves beneath the surface. It was like looking at the neural network of some vast underwater intelligence. pulses of communication flowing between distant points in a language of living light. It's been happening more frequently lately, James said, his arm coming around her waist as they stood together at the window. I think they're responding to the lunar cycle, but also to something else. Something I couldn't figure out until I met you. What do you mean? James turned to face her, his expression tender in the lighthouse's rotating beam. I think they've been waiting, just like I have. Waiting for the right conditions, the right moment. The right connection, as if summoned by his words. The bioluminescent display below intensified, creating spirals of blue-green fire that seemed to dance just for them. Luna watched in fascination, her scientific mind racing even as her heart soared with the romance of the moment. James, she said softly, what if we combined our research? Your documentation from above, my observations from below. We could map the entire communication network, understand how these organisms coordinate across such vast distances. Is that a professional proposal, Dr. Reyes? He asked, smiling at her with such warmth that Luna felt her knees go weak. Professional and personal, she admitted, turning in his arms so they were face to face in the lighthouse's gentle glow. I want to work with you, James. I want to explore these mysteries together. I want to wake up every morning knowing that someone understands my passion, someone shares my wonder. And I want to spend every day learning to see the ocean through your eyes, he replied, his hands coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. I want to help you document your discoveries, support your research. Be your partner in every sense of the word. They kissed again as the lighthouse beam swept over them, bathing them in golden light while the ocean below pulsed with its own ethereal illumination. Luna felt complete in a way she'd never experienced before, not just as a scientist who had found her perfect research partner, but as a woman who had found the love she'd never dared to hope for when they finally broke apart. Luna realized that the most important discovery of her career had nothing to do with bioluminescent organisms or underwater communication networks. Her greatest discovery was standing right in front of her, looking at her with eyes that held the depth of the ocean and the warmth of coming home, hours later. As the lighthouse beam continued its eternal rotation and the ocean settled into the gentle rhythm of night tides, Luna and James sat together on the observation deck, wrapped in a soft blanket in each other's arms. The bioluminescent display had gradually faded, leaving behind the peaceful darkness of deep ocean punctuated by starlight reflected on the water's surface. Luna had never felt so perfectly content. Her head rested against James's shoulder, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warm strength of his arms around her. They had spent the evening poring over his research, comparing notes and photographs, making plans for joint expeditions that would combine their unique perspectives on the ocean's mysteries. But more than that, they had spent the evening learning each other the way James laughed when she told him about her first disastrous attempt at underwater photography. The way his eyes lit up when he described the rescue missions that had brought him purpose even in their danger. The way they both fell silent when they talked about the loneliness that had brought them to this isolated edge of the world. I have a confession, Luna murmured against his shoulder, her voice soft in the peaceful darkness. Oh. James's hand stroked gently through her hair, the gesture unconscious and soothing. I've been watching the lighthouse for months. Sometimes when I was working late at the research station, I'd see someone moving around up here, and I'd wonder about you. Wonder what kind of person chose to live so close to the sea. James chuckled, the sound vibrating through his chest where her head rested. I have a confession too, he said. I've been watching the research station just as long. wondering about the woman brave enough to live right on top of the ocean, wondering what drew you to such an isolated place. And now we know, Luna said softly. Now we know, he agreed, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. They were quiet for a while, listening to the eternal conversation between wind and water far below. Luna felt herself drifting in that peaceful space between waking and sleep, lulled by the warmth of James's embrace and the hypnotic rhythm of the lighthouse beam. Luna. James's voice was gentle, barely above a whisper. Tomorrow, when we go back down to the caves, will you teach me to see them the way you do? Not just as a research site, but as home. Luna smiled against his shoulder, her heart swelling with tenderness. Only if you'll teach me to see the ocean from up here, to understand its moods from the surface the way you do. Deal, he said, his arms tightening around her slightly. Though I have to warn you, once you start really seeing the ocean's patterns, its rhythms, it becomes impossible to look away. I don't want to look away, Luna whispered. Not from the ocean, and not from this. Not from us. James was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of promises and hope. I spent so long thinking that the ocean was where I'd lost everything that mattered. But it turns out it was just waiting to give me something even more precious. What's that? You, he said simply. A future. A reason to stop just surviving and start living again. Luna felt tears of happiness prick at her eyes. She lifted her head to look at him in the soft lighthouse glow, memorizing the tender expression on his face, the way the rotating beam caught the gold flecks in his blue eyes. I love you, she said, the words carrying all the wonder and certainty she felt. I love you, and I love the life we're going to build together. Here, with the ocean, with our research, with all the mysteries we'll solve side by side. I love you too, James replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead with infinite gentleness. More than I ever thought possible. More than I knew my heart could hold. As they settled back into comfortable silence, Luna felt herself drifting toward sleep, cradled in James's arms and surrounded by the peaceful sounds of their ocean home. She thought about the day's impossible journey from equipment disaster to underwater wonder to finding the love of her life and marveled at how the ocean had orchestrated it all. Tomorrow, they would dive together again, exploring the bioluminescent caves as partners in every sense of the word. They would document their discoveries, combine their research, work toward understanding the vast communication network that pulsed beneath the waves. But more than that, they would continue learning each other, building the kind of deep, abiding love that could weather any storm. Sleep. My love, James whispered as Luna's breathing deepened and her body relaxed completely against his. The ocean will keep watch over us tonight. And tomorrow we'll discover new wonders together. Luna smiled in her half-sleep. Her last conscious thought a prayer of gratitude to the sea that had brought them together. She had spent years studying the mysteries of bioluminescence, learning how tiny organisms could create beauty from darkness. But she had never understood the most important lesson those creatures had to teach. That sometimes the most brilliant light comes from two separate sources joining together, creating something far more radiant than either could achieve alone. As the lighthouse beam continued its faithful rotation and the ocean whispered its eternal lullabies against the cliff, Luna and James drifted into peaceful sleep, wrapped in each other's arms and surrounded by the promise of all the adventures their love would bring. In the waters far below, the bioluminescent organisms pulsed gently in the darkness, their patterns of light carrying messages of connection, communication, and the endless possibility of finding your perfect match in the vast mystery of the deep. The tide pool whisperer and her lighthouse keeper had found their home at last, and the ocean settled contentedly around them, knowing that some love stories are written in starlight on water, meant to last as long as waves meet shore, and as Luna's breathing deepened into the rhythm of peaceful sleep, her dreams filled with visions of swimming through liquid starlight, hand in hand with the man who had taught her that the ocean's greatest treasure wasn't hidden in its deepest caves, but floating right beside her, ready to explore every mystery the waves could offer. Together, the end thank you for joining Luna and James on their romantic journey beneath the waves. Sweet dreams, dear listeners, and may your own heart find its perfect diving partner in the vast ocean of possibility.